It's one of those ultimate paradoxes that some of the loneliest days of our lives are going to be spent in the company of the people that we love the most, or indeed the times when we feel most rejected, we're going to be around the people that we're meant to be the closest to. And I think this is going to be more apparent than ever during the pandemic because our normal everyday distractions are no longer available to us. We're not going to work, we're not going to the gym, we're not meeting a friend for coffee, and consequently, any strain in our relationship is going to become more salient. Any disconnect, whether it be mental, emotional, spiritual, or physical, is going to be right under our noses and all of a sudden brought into our focus. And I suppose, first of all, we need to look at this within the context that it's occurring. I mean, if these issues are very isolated in the current isolation situation, well, we have to be very compassionate and understanding and forgiving and realistic about the pressure and the strain that people are finding themselves under. I mean, it's a very unique circumstance. Everyone reacts and responds differently, so again, finding that understanding and trying to reconcile as much as possible whilst trying to navigate your way through these unique set of circumstances is important. Now, I also like to introduce the caveat that if there's any type of abuse occurring, whether it be emotional, financial, verbal, sexual, physical, that is a whole other level of relationship issue. And there are organizations that are specifically designed to deal with that sort of stuff, and they're operational. So don't feel like you have to, handle this by yourself, or that you have to stay in isolation if you feel unsafe. However, when it comes to more day-to-day relationship issues, I suppose, first of all, if it's something that has been, an issue in your relationship for a substantial amount of time, if you feel lonely, if you feel disconnected, if you feel misunderstood or unheard or unseen or unappreciated, well, it's something that you do need to address. Oftentimes, I feel we treat relationship issues like an elephant in the room. We just hope that if we just ignore them, that they'll go away. But that's very rarely the case. And it takes a lot of vulnerability and a lot of courage even to get to that point of recognition where you say, hang on a second here, things aren't quite the way they should be. And again, we bring with us the patterns of our past. Our constructs and blueprint for relationships are very much the result of our upbringing. So oftentimes we bring maladaptive ideas and expectations for relationships and what a partner should be into our relationship with us. And this is why building self-awareness is so important. You need to understand the way in which you interpret the world, the expectations that you have for the world, and the triggers that set you off, so that you're not always reacting, so that you don't have expectations that are way too high for anyone to ever actually meet, and that you're very clear about the way in which you see things that possibly isn't all that realistic. And again, that takes a lot of courage to actually do that, because again, you have to be able to challenge your own mind. You have to be modest enough and humble enough to recognize that you're not always right, that sometimes you don't see things clearly. We like to think we're rational, and we're not, particularly if we're feeling rejected, or if we're feeling any level of pain or any level of distress, which oftentimes our relationships will bring up in us. It can be really, really difficult to take a step back and to try to see things with a little bit of objectivity, yet it's so important to do that. So the first task I would give anyone is to question what they are projecting onto the current problem. Is it a subjective issue? If not, then you need to start looking at the relationship and trying to clarify exactly what it is that isn't wrong. Oftentimes we have a vague idea, but we don't actually clearly identify the issue. I feel because, and we tend to go in there all guns blazing. We tend to be quite reactive in our relationships, and a lot of, I suppose, discussions take place in the context of an argument. as opposed to recognizing that there is an issue, specifying what that issue is, and then agreeing to sit down at a time that is, I suppose, suitable for both parties to discuss it and to both be able to talk about what your experience is, let your partner talk about their experience, try to understand their perspective, allow both sides to lay things out on the table. So there's a lot of clarity there. And that requires a willingness and a vulnerability and a courage from both parties, because again, it's so much easier to just hope that it's all going to go away, or to scream at each other, and kind of hurl insults. But to do things maturely takes a lot of I suppose, just rawness, and just being able to expose yourself and expose your fears and expose how it is that you're actually feeling, because a lot of us haven't that emotional intelligence. It's something that we're not equipped with, so it's something that we need to work on within the realms of our relationship, and two parties need to be willing to help each other to do that. Now, you also have to be aware that there's stuff going on for your partner that you don't know about. Again, we tend to be very myopic and self-centered. We tend to assume it's all about us, it's all about our pain, it's all about our struggle. And again, that isn't a great way to engage in a relationship. You have to understand that the other person has feelings. Now, it's also good to look at some of the obstacles to your relationship. And one big one that I see coming up with people I'm working with at the moment is phones, whether it be the use of phones as a barrier to connection, whether it be the use of porn, whether it be, kind of groups, WhatsApp groups where there's inappropriate material coming through and it's really hurting one party. All of these issues need to be laid on the table, and couples need to discuss what their boundaries are, what's okay and what's not. And I think oftentimes when we get into a relationship, we focus very much on a person's charisma and what they look like and what their career is, as opposed to actually looking at whether or not the foundational stuff is in place. And the foundational stuff is basically what your core values and beliefs are, what you want your life to look at. And if they're not aligned, then the likelihood is there is going to be a rift, there is going to be disconnect as you move further down the line. And again, people evolve, people change, so you have to recognize that as well. Your relationship is going to evolve. You will not be the same people 5 years down the line as you were when you first met. So you have to allow for that. Holding on to this one very stagnant time in your relationship is not a good idea. You have to be able to allow for the fact that there's going to be peaks and troughs. You're going to have times where you possibly don't like each other all that much or question your relationship, but that is normal. And I suppose it's coming together and communicating and making a conscious choice to choose the other person each day and to do your best to show up for them and to see things from their perspective, because you're going to have challenges, you're going to have kids, you're going to have the coronavirus, you're going to have God knows what over the years. So it's about continuously making the decision to communicate, to appreciate each other, to be affectionate, to be kind to each other, to be respectful, because again, it can be very easy to be contemptuous or to criticize your partner or to focus on all of the stuff that's missing in your relationship, particularly when you go onto social media and you see, you could be sitting quite content on your couch on a Saturday night, and then you go online and you see somebody else in, Thailand, and you're like, oh my God, my life is shit. And again, this is the whole idea of the recency bias. I was fine a few minutes ago, but now all of a sudden I feel bad, so my entire relationship has always been bad and inadequate. So be very realistic about your thought process and the stories that you're telling yourself, Be aware of covert anger. Relationships are full of issues like stonewalling and passive aggression. And the more open we can be, the more ready we can be to delve into uncomfortable conflict, but in a healthy manner, the more likely we are to resolve things, as opposed to carrying simmering resentment with us all the time, you know. And again, as I said, it's you and your partner versus the world, not you and your partner versus each other. So be kind to each other, love each other, be affectionate, be appreciative, and listen intently, as opposed to listening while scrolling through Instagram. So I hope everyone is keeping well, and I will talk to you again soon.